This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
So only I'm doing Instagram, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Alright.
I mean, Stanley, if you wanted to go on Instagram Live with me.
I really didn't.
No, I'm just saying you have the option, but...
Alright. I'm pressing record now, okay?
Hold on. Let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
Alright. Grab something to drink.
Alright.
So Zoom has an option, but you have to be paid for it, where you can like stream your Zoom to Facebook Live.
Nice. I wonder how much it costs.
Alright.
Alright, so I guess you guys aren't going to see me when I'm on the, reading from my notes and everything else.
Well, if folks want to join the Zoom link, I can add them and mute them.
How would we... I'm not even sure if folks have Zoom.
Nope. It's like a workplace thing. But also,
Okay.
I'm at the point now where I just want to record the podcast.
No, we're all at that point. It's a lot. It's like 12:30. Yeah, I don't know if it's necessary to invite people.
Alright.
Okay. Alright, I guess regular countdown and the show will start, okay?
Alright. And gonna start recording in 3, 2.
Oh, hold on, Stanley, hold on. Let me do the countdown.
Okay.
Easier for me. Alright. You want to start it off, Stanley?
I thought you just said you wanted to do the countdown.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. Can you do it and start it off?
Okay. Recording in 3, 2, 1. Alright, welcome to a new episode of Let Your Voice Be Heard. Oh, god damn it. Yeah. Force a habit.
What happened?
I said let your voice be heard.
Oh, it's okay. It's fine.
Alright. Welcome to a new episode of Be Heard Talk. This is Stanley Fritz. I'm here with Selena Hill and of course Tammy Marie David. Alright guys. This is an interesting show. This is the Corona Quarantine show because we are all in our homes. 1.5 of us are home because we are on forced quarantine. And the half of us might actually need to be on quarantine. I won't tell you which one that is. And then there's Tammy, who's just wonderful and brilliant as usual, and healthy and young and vibrant. So, guys, this is the first time we've done a show remotely. So bear with us. There might be some technical difficulties. There might be some sound issues. But we want you guys to know that we really want to get this show done today because we really want to make sure folks have the information they need. And we missed you guys. So you'll still be able to hear this on the podcast. And it'll be all good. So, Tammy, how's your day going so far?
Who?
Is that Tammy?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Wow. Well, my day is going hilariously, Stanley. It's been an hour and a half of us trying to record this podcast, so I feel like I, more than ever, are not prepared to work from home and be stuck in a quarantine. But, you live your life.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I mean, so I've been under quarantine for a few days now, so I'm super happy to do anything that exists outside. I'm happy for the show. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, every time I look at my phone, it's a new update about coronavirus. Like, I'm sure you guys are feeling the same way. There's a lot of misinformation out there, as well as a lot of information to take in because the updates are nonstop. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it with you guys. I'm also live on IG, so if you guys have questions or comments or want to chime in, please feel free to leave those comments and we will address them. So basically, what we're doing now, we're recording via Zoom, IG Live, and then we're going to release the podcast. So shout out to anyone who is listening in any one of those three ways. So I mean, before we talk about this coronavirus, let's talk about some of the good things and bizarre things that happened in the past few weeks. I mean, Tammy, I know you heard about Andrew Gillum. I mean, if you want to just kick off with the news roundup.
So I'm super excited for the news roundup stories today. Mayor Gillum turned up. Actually, I feel like Mayor Gillum is exactly where I want to be. Instead of stuck at home. I kind of feel like, okay, so for those of you who don't know the story, Andrew Gillum, mayor of Tallahassee in Florida, was found at a hotel party, supposedly entirely inebriated, and with a bag of what looked like and is suspected to be crystal meth. Now, I don't know about you guys. I don't do meth. But in this quarantine, I'm itching for a good party. And I can't fault him. Can you guys? Like, what do you think?
Wait. Meth? Meth?
Yeah.
Like methadone?
Yes, methamphetamines.
Methamphetamine, not methadone.
Why is Andrew Gillum, why is he around meth?
So, apparently, he was with a male escort and, 2-3 other guys having a really good time in Miami. I mean, his alibi was that he was at a wedding, but his wife wasn't there. And some people overdose. So, I mean, I don't know what he's into or what's going on, but then it was Candace Owens who put out a tweet who kind of like shamed him and put out some misinformation. So, people are going back and forth because no matter how you slice this looks bad for Andrew Gillum, like regardless, right? But I feel like Candace Owens is not a reliable news source because she's pretty much a right-wing provocateur. That's what she does. So it's like, and it's like I want to believe him, but where was this wedding?
So, I mean, listen, there's been rumors that Andrew Gillum is really gay and that his wife is his beard for a long time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Candace Owens is lying because she's a liar and she's an Uncle Tom and she's a coon and she's a bootlicker and I don't like her. And the ancestors would be disappointed in her and they would hate her. And I would agree with them for hating her and being disappointed with her and that she should not be allowed to be black and should have her black card taken away from her. But despite having said all that, because there's been rumors about him being gay, when she put out that story saying that the guy that Andrew was going to see was a male prostitute for men, it made the story seem type valid to some folks. I say leave the man alone. I believed Andrew Gillum until I saw his statement. The statement was all well and good. Then he ended it with, I need to be alone with my family in this time. What the hell does that mean?
He wants privacy. It just means he wants privacy.
Yeah, but usually people say that when they did something fucked up and it's like, oh, I gotta focus on family now.
Yeah, but it's because that's what it's like in America, you're expected to there's this like undertone of like weird subversive Christianity. No offense to the Christians, but like this idea that, when you do something ungodlike, you go back and repent and you like go back to your family and they have to forgive you. I'm not, okay, I don't even know why this story is really news. Like, to me, it's just so irritating how politicians are held to some sort of higher standard, like put on a pedestal. And I don't know, in other countries, there's like politicians who do really crazy things in their personal lives. And,
like meth?
I don't know, like gay parties and like freaky dungeons. And
that's not crazy.
Well, yeah, I think so. Like, it's in the same realm. Like, kind of, basically in America, if you're not squeaky clean, then there's a scandal around you, and I don't like that. Who cares if he parties, Like,
what happened to that mayor in Canada who was doing crack?
Yeah, good for him. Like,
what was his name?
Live your life, bro. Like,
And then, like, they accused him of sexual harassment of offering to, like, eat somebody's box. And then he was like, I've got plenty of that at home. I don't need to...
Oh, I remember that.
I think he died, actually. Rest in peace.
That's really bold.
Well, that's Andrew Gillum. What else we got on the docket, Tammy?
Anyway, speaking of messy politicians, the Democratic primary is going absolutely bonkers. Biden has come to the front. Sanders is feeling petty. I'm not so sure about what we're going to see in the next few weeks with this outbreak, but one thing is crystal clear. Joe Biden is the Democratic sweetie, and he may probably cinch that nomination. Now, since Super Tuesday, Biden has won so far 4 out of the 5 accounted for states from the 10th primaries, as well as secured new what do you call it? Endorsements from Andrew Yang, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. I mean, what's up with that? Like, why are we lining up behind this super messy dude who, like, definitely has some form of dementia?
Well, in my point of view, Democrats think that if Bernie wins a nominee, that he's going to cost them down ballot races. So U.S. Senate races, U.S. congressional races, and some local state Senate and Assembly races that they really want to get so that they can flip the district when it's time to redistrict. Additionally, one of the things that people are frustrated with Bernie, or you think there's a problem with Bernie, is that they don't think that he can actually beat Trump. I guess they're doing internal polling, whatever it is. So now they're getting around Biden, who can actually get the black vote. And the black vote suffered in the 2016 election. So they think Biden can carry the black vote.
Yeah, no, I think for a lot of folks, Biden is safe. But then again, for I think, millennials and particularly progressives and the Latino community, Latinx community, they want Bernie. We want something new. I mean, I'm tired of the same old. I think that for many people, the political revolution that Bernie has always advocated for is something that's too radical. But if you look at his policies, all he wants to do is uplift working class people. They're not radical at all. Like, other countries have free, universal health care. Other countries, use government taxpayer money to fund higher education in colleges. So, I mean, the thing is, I'm so over it. And I know me, like, especially on our show, our podcast, I've said, like, I'm voting blue regardless. And I'm probably going to stick to that. But I'm so, like, in the past few weeks, I've gotten so invested, like, reinvested into Bernie Sanders, where it's like, what frustrates me the most is how much the establishment machine is pushing Biden because he's safe. And because he's going to keep Wall Street corporatists and capitalists on his team and basically around him so that they stay safe. And that's something that really irks me.
Yeah, and then also Bernie's been going around saying he's going to destroy the machine, and, like, people don't want to do that. Sorry,
right.
Go ahead, Tammy.
So the media, something that particularly irks me is that people are going for Biden because the media keeps peddling that he's safe, but who is he safe for? Because I just feel like the Democratic establishment keeps peddling that he's the safe option who will win against Trump, but it is shown in polls that he is less likely to beat Trump than Sanders is. Like, I genuinely feel like we're going off of, like, 3 people in the top 1% saying, no, Joe's your guy. And then you hear it so many times that you start to internalize it.
I mean,
it's really sad.
Tell out to the black voters in South Carolina, because 77% of them voted for Biden. Or the black folks in Mississippi, where 70% of them voted for him. Biden is, like, he's killing the black vote. No one else has been able to get the black vote. And it's not necessarily, I mean, I think because he's Obama's homie is a big part of it, but it's also the fact that, like, there's just been, like, Bernie is not working for it. Bernie didn't even reach out to Jim Claiborne to talk about getting an endorsement. He didn't reach out to Andrew Yang. So...
Well, he did reach out to Elizabeth Warren, and Warren...
No, he didn't, actually.
Well, I read a report where he actually called her up and asked her for her endorsement.
And
yeah, they had a conversation, and she's not backing him.
Yeah, well, like, Elizabeth Warren has time to do that, 1. And 2, that conversation sort of started a long time ago when it was obvious that he was in the lead. And so that's one of the criticisms they're having of Bernie Sanders. I'm still voting for Bernie because that's my candidate. And if Biden wins the nomination, depending on who he picks as his vice president, I will still vote blue. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, like, one of the hard pills I'm having to swallow about this thing is that people are just not as ready for a quote-unquote political revolution as we think. And particularly black and brown people, because they're not showing up for it. And young people, as excited as they are on social media, they're not voting. They're not turning out. There's been a boost in turnout, but it has not been from young voters or for black people voting for Bernie. It's been for college-educated white men voting for Biden.
So I guess another thing we can expect to see is lack of turnout for like the rest of the election year. Because what I'm seeing, based on your comments, Stanley, is that we're not having the turnout we need to build a political revolution. And then with this coronavirus scare going on, people aren't really going to be showing up like that. And then there's one more important thing on the agenda that turnout is key for: the census. Because that's how we're going to get resources into our community, and that's how we're going to do the political education work that we need.
Yeah. That's 100%
Just wanted
true.
to let you guys know, listeners, the census went live this week. Please go online and fill out the census if you can. You don't have to wait for the card that they mail you. I'm pretty sure things are going to be moving slowly anyway. Just click that "Don't Have My Card" link and fill out the census. It doesn't matter if you're undocumented. They're not looking for that. It doesn't matter if you don't have a job or you just moved. Just please, 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 there's one thing you can do amidst this coronavirus scare from the safety of your house. Is fill out the census.
Yeah, absolutely right about that. What else we got going on in the news right now? Meg Thee Stallion's having some serious contract issues. Yo, did you guys see the message that Jay Prince left on IG about Meg Thee Stallion?
Yeah, oh my God, I thought that was so disrespectful.
Yo.
I really thought that was so disrespectful.
Like, I mean, I was listening to the Joe Budden podcast, and they made a comment that I kind of agree with. And they were like, if this was a dude that was talking and stuff, he would have already got beat up or his face shot off. Because shit like this stuff like this happens all the time with record labels, and they don't say anything because there's usually somebody in the background who's strong-arming you, as Meg Thee Stallion has alluded to. So I had Jay Prince's comment here if you guys want me to read some of it.
Yes.
All right. So Jay Prince posted this on March 5th. He goes, "Houston, we have a problem. Megan, along with Roc Nation employee Geet Nahahi, Grace Liar, decided to include my name in a lawsuit wrapped around lies and stupidity. We gonna get this straight. Now, let's deal with the root of this issue. The root is a familiar one for me coming from a successful independent record label perspective. We as an independent label make many sacrifices along with our artist. After we do all the hard work together with the artist, it is a known fact that major record labels and established managers attempt to poach the fruits of our labor. One of the first things they do is criticize the deal that raised the artist from dead. These record labels and managers don't want shit to do with these artists until the hard work, risk, sacrifices, and resources have been spent by the little guys. This is the same technique of the culture vultures. I didn't allow this to happen to me when New York and LA record labels attempted to take my artist, so they labeled me as malicious for fighting back. I didn't allow it then, so I damn sure ain't gonna allow it to happen to 1501 Records or any other independent record label that I'm associated with. For the record, we have no problem with negotiating with Megan, but we do have a problem with dictators. I find it very interesting that Roc Nation would allow their employee to sign an affidavit and statement full of slanderous lies on my methods of doing business when we have partnered together on several occasions. I don't think Jay is aware of this, but only time will tell. Megan, even though she signed an affidavit, talked down, and lied in court documents on me. I understand how lawyers brainwash artists to milk them of funds in lawsuits that they know they can't win. Megan seems to be a perfect candidate for self-destruction. Any artist in the music industry will testify that 40% profit share is a great deal, especially for an unestablished artist that till this day has never delivered an album. To end this, I give credit to where credit is due. Megan, along with her mother, who evidently could read, God rest her soul, negotiated a good deal." Hold on, there's a little bit more. And he goes, last paragraph. "To end this, I give credit to where credit is due. Megan's mom could negotiate a good deal. I extend my hand to meet with Megan, T. Farris, and team personally for further negotiations. Unfortunately, it never happened, even though they were all in Houston, because she's being controlled by the very people who started this shit. The homie Carl Crawford was an angel in Megan's eyes when he was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars investing in her career. Now that he's helped her become a successful artist, she stopped paying him his percentage and views him as the devil. I'm glad money don't make me. I make money.
That's wild crazy. I mean, with that being said, she got a temporary court order so that he could release her album.
And it came out.
Which is slapping, by the way.
Sugar.
Oh my god.
So, but like that being said, so what's her status with the record label?
They got a temporary order. The album came out. It's not an album, actually. So she still has not put out an album with the label. So an album in today's metrics is a project that's at least 45 minutes long. Sugar is 40 minutes long.
Okay, it doesn't make the cut.
Yo, and she's only on a 3-album deal. I don't understand why she didn't she's had just put out 3 albums real quick. It's not like before, where before you were lucky if you can get into the studio. If a label didn't want you to make music, they would lock you from the studio, and they were too expensive to get on your own. You can record anywhere now. Just put some fucking music out. What is she doing?
So you don't agree with the stance she's taking, Stanley?
So it's not that I don't agree. It's that her deal, there's some parts of it where it's a little bit funny, but for the most part, that's a standard artist deal. You never get 100% of your publishing. You never get 100% of your masters. A 60-40 split is pretty good. There are people out there getting worse. Now, the part that's funny is a mismanagement of money. And they got to talk about that. But that's a decent deal.
Yeah, but when you talk 60-40, she still has to pay out her team. Like the producers.
Yeah, that's the funny stuff.
Yeah, and that's not really a fair deal.
But she signed it.
Yeah, she did sign it. But what else was she going to do? Just say no to her dream?
No, I mean, you're right about that. But you're big right now. Put out some albums. If you put out, this album, if she would have did 5 more minutes on this project right here, it would have been an album. And she could have gone back and be like, yo, I did 18 million streams the first week. Let's renegotiate. Now you have leverage because you show you can deliver.
Right.
But why are they going to renegotiate with you right now?
So Bianca PR left a comment on my IG live. She says Megan should do what Drake did, put out an album part A and a part B.
Yep.
And boom, 2 albums in one right there.
Yeah, that's what Drake did. That's how he got his Young Money deal.
Nice.
And back in the days, they were signing you to 5, 10 album deals. Kanye West is on an album deal where unlimited albums forever. No, and he's suing to get out of that contract now. But they used to lock you in on 5, 10 album deals. Only 3 albums? You can do that in a year and a half. Future.
So you think that her complaints are just based on misinformation?
No. I think that, Jay Prince is somebody different. I'm not really, if you know hip-hop, you know Jay Prince. But, it seems the Funny Money situation, I hear that. The way, she says she only got, $15,000 out of all the money she's made so far. That's weird. But, you have no leverage to get your deal renegotiated when you have not put out an album. Because as far as the label's concerned, they haven't made any money from it. So why would they renegotiate with you? So put out an album, make back what you signed for, and then renegotiate.
Before we wrap up, I do have another comment. So Mr. DJ, okay, I cannot read this name, but he says, makes me wonder what the deeper issue is because she could have been out of this already. So basically, just agreeing to your first point, Stanley. Any final thoughts before you move on?
Honestly, I agree with that dude. Something's up, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm rooting for her. Hot girl team all the way.
For real. Speaking of hot girls, Nicki Minaj.
Ugh.
She's a hot girl and her husband is a hot boy.
Yeah.
More like a hot mess.
No, he's a hot mess. There we go. Her husband is a hot mess. he got arrested because he did not register as a sex offender in California. I think he's only registered in New York. I mean, I just feel like Nick cannot win. Like, from the music to the beefs to her husband, it's always some problems.
She creates them, TBH. Why are you gonna marry a pedophile? That's
gross.
But I mean, she said, and I believe she said that the reason why he was registered as a sex offender is because when he was 17, he had sex with a 16-year-old. So I think, I mean, is it? I don't want to say is it that deep, but if that's what happened, isn't that like something we can understand? No.
Well, sure, but register as a sex offender because he's supposed to. Why did he not do that?
The law is the law.
Yeah, just like that doesn't seem like maybe he like that happens to a lot of kids. Like if you're in high school and you send news to somebody else from high school and you get caught, that's considered sharing child pornography.
You're right.
So like that could be what actually happened with him, but just register as a sex offender. And why does Nicki Minaj know so many sex offenders?
I know. Like, girl, broaden your circle. Girl, go to yoga. Get some cleansing of your aura.
Yeah.
Why are you attracting so many dirty men? Well, okay, one of them's her brother, so.
And he's big bad. Like,
he's big bad.
They found his nut on the kid's shorts.
Disgusting.
Yo, like what the fuck? Oh, sorry.
That's. No, but it's.
Yeah, no, it's sad. So Bianca says, Selena, you've been wanting Nicki to win. Not true. I mean, I kind of tapped out of Nick. Like, don't get me wrong, I was a huge fan, but I think that
she's
self-destructive. That beef with Cardi B and kind of like Tammy said, like she causes these problems on herself instead of just pass the crown. You have a legacy. You already reached icon status. It's another woman rapper came about, Cardi B. She hit the chart, and I feel like Nicki felt very threatened by that, very intimidated. And instead of sharing and opening up that space for other women to come behind her, she kind of tried to like tear her down a little. She started making subliminal attacks, and that's just not wavy right now. So that's how I feel.
I said it on the Tyler Perry show, and I'll say it again. She is so coked out. Like, she is an out-of-control Sagittarius, and believe you me, we are an absolute nightmare when we are allowed to thrive. So, she's got to get clean up, sober up, maybe take a long, hard look at her life, and maybe she'll stop being so nasty. But till then, it's her karma. Petty's back in the pen.
Oh, just real quick, Stanley, before you chime in, Bianca says she should have passed the crown like Kobe did to LeBron. Bars.
Well, Kobe retired, so like that was,
But still, he supported LeBron. Remember, one of his last posts on social media was the fact that LeBron had, I think, scored more points and beat his record. And he like congratulated him for that. I don't see that type of love and respect, necessarily from Nicki to any other woman rapper who may be superseding some of her records or whatever.
Yeah, that's a factory. That's definitely a factory. She's insecure. She needs therapy and rehab and more therapy and a lot more rehab.
Needs therapy.
Yo, like, I mean, I don't mean to make it seem like she's around a bunch of pedophiles, but she knows too. But so we're gonna wrap up the Zoom live and pick up on Anchor. We'll be right back after this break. Okay.
All right. Okay. Take a quick break.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys. Bye. Tell them, Selena. I'm trying to leave.
What a world.
All right, ending the meeting.
All right.
Hey, Tammy. I guess the only one that hasn't had any deeply problematic issues. I'm I'm sorry for being so annoyed, but like I knew this was gonna happen, and I was just like, why can't we just record here? Yeah, but it's all good. We want to have a show, so like this is important. Um, but the Zoom audio is like it's processing now. Once it's done processing, we should be done with this show too, and I'll like combine both audio clips. The audio is going to be slightly off, like as far as like quality. I think the Zoom audio is going to be better. Yeah, because Zoom, sorry, not Zoom, Anchor is going to be better. Yeah, Anchor is like it's done specifically for podcasts, so like it just does a better job of the processing and like it does a better job of like not capturing outside noise. I, we can do two more stories. I'm happy to do that. I don't know if I wanted to read the whole news roundup. Let's see what Selena says when she gets on. Um, but we'll do this. We don't have to do that at all. I can combine the audio once I get it. Yeah. Yeah, and also the curse word. I got it. Because I'm listening to Professor Hardin. Well, Sammy, didn't you have something to say? And I said I'm willing to do two additional stories. That's it. She wants to do it over, and I said I was willing to do two more stories. So we're waiting to hear what you think.
I had way too much to drink. These bottles keep flying, these hoes keep trying to link. But my cup overflowing.
All right, guys. So we're back. We just wrapped up the news roundup where we talked about Megan Thee Stallion, Bernie Sanders, and Joe Biden. We talked about Nicki Minaj and her petty husband, literally, because his last name is Petty. And we talked about the census, and of course, Mayor Gillum, who I don't know is on some next level, but maybe, as Tammy suggested, we need to just let politicians live their crazy, kinky lives. Nonetheless, it's time to talk about Corona, because to quote Cardi B, coronavirus is getting real. So the NBA has been suspended indefinitely. Airlines are canceling flights en masse. Disneyland closed in California. Hotel revenues are sinking. The travel industry is plummeting. Americans are banned from traveling to 26 European countries. Restaurants, mom and pop shops, and many small businesses are struggling to keep their doors open, and people like myself have been told to stay inside. And that's just in the US. Abroad, France has shut down all restaurants, clubs, and cinemas, while in Spain, people are banned from leaving home except for buying essential supplies and medicines or going to work. And in Italy, 16 million people have been placed on mandatory lockdown, a mandatory nationwide lockdown. But outside of COVID-19 massive disruption to our lives, we cannot forget about the millions of working class people who are in jeopardy of losing their jobs, not having enough food, and not being secure or stable enough for their own children. So the coronavirus, as we know, it's changing the way we as Americans live every day. But for low-wage workers who don't have paid time off, health insurance, or the ability to take time off, the impact is even stronger. Today, there are potentially thousands of workers who may be ill or should be staying at home, but they continue to go to work. Why? Because they have to earn a living wage, they have to pay the rent, they have to put food on the table. Many of these workers, they work in restaurants, transportation, tourism, retail industries, etc. And they have a lot of interaction with the public. Meanwhile, low-wage workers who have access to healthcare, some of them are not even taking advantage of it because of the copay and all of the out-of-pocket costs. Plus, we know that people who are lower socioeconomic means, a lot of times they live in like a crowded situation, or sometimes they're even homeless. A lot of times they suffer from food insecurity or poor nutrition, or they even fear going to the doctor because they're worried about their immigration status. As of today, the U.S. has confirmed at least 51 deaths, and this may go up by the time we finish this podcast, and almost 2,500 infections. Literally, it's growing by the hour. So that's why in this episode, on this podcast, we're talking about the political, economical, and real-life impact that the coronavirus is having on our lives, our country, and our world. So Stanley, I want to throw it to you first, and ask you, how are you coping with the coronavirus? And before you jump in here, let me just be clear. Again, I'm been mandated to quarantine until next Saturday. I don't have it, but I've been in contact with someone who tested positive. So as a precautionary measure, I'm staying home this Saturday. Stanley, how are you coping?
Well, I got really sick last week, Sunday. Had a cold and had a fever, and I was really worried that I had it. And I tried to get tested, and there were no tests available. And I got assessed by a doctor who told me pretty much that I more than likely did not have it because I was already recovering and that I probably had a common cold. But during that time period when I thought I had it, it was really nerve-wracking because it's so easy for anyone to get it, and it knocked me off. I was sick for a week,
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the house, and then just as I'm starting to recover, everything just gets locked down. So I'm struggling from little cabin fever, but just really worried about like a lot of the elderly folks. I'm thinking about my father.
Mm.
I'm thinking about like some of the older people in my life who are more vulnerable to the virus.
Tammy, how are you coping with coronavirus?
So y'all know me. I try to be a clown and make light of a lot of stuff because ultimately this is a systemic issue for me. So it's been hard trying to mitigate anxiety and panic and stuff, but it's getting real on this end. The anxiety of not being let out of work, even as 95% of my office is now working from home, traveling the subways, hearing that this person near me got infected or this person, it's definitely a lot. I'm doing fine because I'm 25, I'm healthy, I'm taking my zinc, my nutritional yeast, emergency, working out, eating produce, doing what I can to stay healthy. But it's hard, it is hard to mitigate the anxiety. And then when you see the cases go up and you see the city's kind of slowed responses and the government slowed responses, you get more and more worried because the numbers go up and you wonder about, the abuelas in your building and all the old folks around you and your elderly family members. So, I'm kind of stressed, but at the same time, it is kind of like an interesting moment in history. And I'm like, I'm healthy, so I'm trying to travel. I'm trying to get on a $60 flight to Puerto Rico round trip. Life is going on, so just basically mitigating anxiety and
trying to figure out what to do with my life right now.
Wow.
Yeah, no, and to your point, I do think a lot of us are very anxiety ridden. It's just uncertainty, right? And because this pandemic is on such a large scale, we're not sure what to do. And to make matters worse, the U.S. government seems to be completely unprepared. And then we have an idiot who's at the helm, Donald Trump, who was literally days ago calling this a hoax. So yeah, like there's no wonder why we have a lot of anxiety. And to top it off, we still have to deal with the conspiracy theories, right? So, we talked about my team, we talked about some of the conspiracy theories that we heard about how and why this even came about. And what I told my team was, honestly, I thought that China had created this to try to reach their population control. But again, it's a conspiracy theory. Don't take it do not take that serious. And I know, Tammy, you had some interesting conspiracy theories that you heard about. What was the craziest one?
Totally. So the craziest one before yesterday was that this is something to get rid of the old people and kick them off Medicaid and like kind of cleanse our society of boomers, so to speak. But yesterday I heard that Trump has it and that negative test was false and that he's hiding it from us because he doesn't want to get thrown out. So
another conspiracy theory.
Dan, what'd you hear that from?
Myself. No, actually, just kidding. My friend on Instagram. Can't remember who told me that. I think Danya. Shout out Danya. She said that.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear tactics going on, and the president is really not helping with it. During a press conference on Thursday or Friday, I think it was, someone asked him, he said, why did you fire the emergency pandemic staff that the White House had staffed up during the Obama administration? And he just didn't even have the answer. He couldn't answer at all. He started bashing the reporter.
Wow.
And then someone asked him, since he had been in contact with multiple people with corona, would he be willing to take the test? And he said, the test is stupid and I probably won't. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz, Republican senator from Texas, was exposed to someone who had corona and had to go into quarantine. And his first day out of quarantine, he ended up touching somebody else who was exposed to corona. So now he's back in quarantine again. Do we have any comments, Selena?
Yeah, we do have a comment. So one comment says, the sad thing is that the Chinese government suppressed info about this months ago when cases, I guess, initially popped up in Wuhan, China. PRJ says, true, if they didn't hide it for so long, we would be better off. So this was happening possibly nearly a year ago. Now, I didn't...
Is that verified, Selena, that China was withholding information?
No,
I don't
it
think
is
it was.
verified. That's one of... So the dude who... the doctor who found this virus was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying that he could not publicize the information. Meanwhile, he was not given the resources to fight at the beginning of the outbreak. So him and his staff got it like right away. And when that started spreading, that's when it went public, but by force, not by China's response.
Yo, that is crazy. Thank you so much for giving that information. And thank you, Tammy, for expanding. I mean, well, regardless...
do we have a news source for that? Because I want to make sure...
I'm going to get on my laptop
I just want to make sure,
and send you guys the source, yeah.
Yeah. Let's make sure we include that in the show notes for people as well. Because, like, with something like this, we want to make sure we have our facts 100% right. But, yeah, and then so China is contesting and saying that actually patient zero was a U.S. soldier. And that, like, it was not them. So there's a lot of he said, she said when it comes to who was responsible for the origins of this disease. But the fact of the matter is, it is decimating communities right now.
Yeah, no, it is. I think that, right, to Stanley's point, regardless of how it got here, it is here. And we all know how we're being affected. I had a couple trips canceled. My cousin's wedding in Grenada canceled. Obviously, I'm in quarantine. But to me, the real effects, the real impact, it's affecting people who are the most vulnerable, right? It's the communities of color. It's the working class. It's the elderly. So Tammy, if you will, how is the coronavirus really affecting our communities and the working class?
Oh boy. This is a long one for me because you all know how I feel about this. Before I get into it though, I just want to say there's a Daily Beast article about the coronavirus whistleblower, Dr. Li Wenliang. There's also an article on the New York Times that talks about a new martyr putting a face on China's deepening crisis and Beijing's failure in response to being notified about it from Wuhan authorities. And then also you can find it on financialtimes.com, which talks about it from the economic standpoint. But still, it does show that there are tributes to this doctor based on the mishandling of the information from Wuhan on the ground. So you guys look him up, Dr. Lee. Thank you so much for all your work. But shout out to your follower, Selena, who brought this to our attention. I just want to say that it could be any country that did this because, as you can see from the U.S.'s response, it's all about keeping the stock market up and money flowing through the economy. It is not about protecting the population. And that's why we're going to see communities of color and the working class hit the hardest. First of all, I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but hourly and wage workers are not being relieved. They're not being relieved. Like, they still have shifts every single day. And the way that it works is that they can't call out sick right away, right? Like, you can call out if you're actually sick, but it's really frowned upon. And then you lose a ton of money. I feel like communities of color and the working class are the people who don't have the luxury to take paid sick leaves to protect themselves and their family, or even to recover and not spread it if they are sick. And most importantly, they're going to keep going to work because they don't have the health care or the financial resources to take care of themselves in the same way that the middle and upper classes do. So I just feel like it's going to be obliterating us.
Stanley, how are communities of color and the working class being affected?
No, I think Tammy hit the nail on the head. And then also, you might be giving people free screenings for the test when you get it, but then the prescriptions and any care you need for that is still going to have you paid on by yourself. And if you don't have health insurance, which most of this country still does not have, you are going to be facing a pretty big penny. This is going to be a very expensive pandemic, and a lot more people may not die from coronavirus, but we might see a lot of people go bankrupt because of coronavirus. Those small mom and pop shops where, they own a business, but they're not necessarily doing like the best, and missing a week worth of work or a week worth of slow business could really send them down the wrong line. They're going to be in a lot of trouble. Those folks who will have to take sick time off because their kids are sick or because they get sick, but don't get paid for that sick time, they're going to be in trouble. Or when business is slowing down, so you have to fire people now or let them go or not give them hours and they can't pay their rent. These are all the ways that people are actively going to be struggling and suffering from the coronavirus. And this is just very problematic, and it shows the huge gaps we have in our government.
Stanley, I'm so glad that you brought up the economic impact to working class people. We actually got a comment. Someone says they can call out sick, they just won't get paid. You can create your own income. This is why we preach economic freedom. I do think that for a lot of people, they don't, at this point, like, yes, I get it, you can create other streams of revenue, but I feel like some of our older folks, like 50, 60, who may not be as technically savvy, who may not feel like they have the time to create a new stream of revenue because they're already working 2 or 3 jobs just to get their kid through college. That's not always a reality. And yes, I'm here for preaching economic freedom, especially to the younger folks, because they know how to code and use Facebook and everything. But I do think that we need to deal with the reality. And
that's sorry about that, Selena. That's just a little bit narrow-minded to say that, like, financial freedom, create your own stream of income with what? Where? The fact of the matter is, there might be some people who can come up with a business model that works in this very specific situation, but a lot of people will not. And what are they supposed to do? You're going to go sell lemonade in the corner when no one's outside? Where you get lemonade from? You got to have money to invest in this stuff. That's just not practical right now. It just isn't. And this is why you pay taxes, so that when things like this happen, the government can take care of things. The government can make sure everyone has the insurance they need. The government can make sure people have food and clothing. It's financial. Like starting a business that doesn't do anything for you right now. It takes most businesses 5 to 10 years to even become like fully monetized in a way that benefits the owner anyway.
Yeah.
That's not a practical solution at all.
You know, and before, because I know you want to weigh in here, Tammy, you know, to your point, Stanley, someone left a comment. They said the other issue is people not patronizing their business because they're staying home, cooking at home, etc. So even if somebody does have a mom and pop store or a small business, if people can't patronize it, your business can't survive. So I agree with you 100%. I wanted to bring up the fact that the House of Representatives yesterday passed a sweeping coronavirus financial aid package, which strengthens existing unemployment insurance, food assistance, and will provide people with free diagnosis testing for the virus. However, even if this bill passes and like Trump signs it into law, another portion of the bill that provides people leave with a leave option who may be like infected or may need to care for somebody else who's infected, it does not cover everyone. So we have 33.6 million American workers who receive no form of paid sick leave, with the lowest paid workers being especially vulnerable. So even if the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is enacted, millions of working people will still be left without a way to take time off from work or continue to make a living. And it's like, is that the best that our government could do?
Is
right
that
now, Kim?
so? When I hear this, when I hear a House passing a bill like this, I don't think it's going to get through. Like just a few days ago, the Senate vetoed a bill that the House had passed on mandating like a few weeks extension of paid sick leave. So when I hear something like this, I genuinely feel like the GOP is not going to see that as feasible, especially considering how much money they just pumped into the stock market. Yup.
1.5 trillion.
Honestly, on that note of like all those people who still are going to be denied coverage, like so many people in this country like are working full time theoretically, especially the working class, obviously, but it's not one job full time. It's 2 to 3 part-time jobs. Like all of those people don't have the benefits, like i.e. health insurance or care that they need to like properly get tested for their community. They also don't have the right to leave that those like that full-time workers would have. In order to have these sick leave privileges, I believe a lot of people, like especially in the part-time, you know, food service industry or, you know, minimum wage industry, they're not going to have access to this.
No, they're definitely not. And another concern that Stanley had brought up when we were having this conversation offline, he said, what about all the Black folks who live in the South that are being run, where it's being run by conservative governments? Stanley, I wanted to ask you that question. How is the virus affecting the conservative states in the South?
So we don't have a clear idea of what that looks like just yet, but I'll give you an example. In New York State, the governor and the legislature passed a bill that would provide temporary paid sick time to like all New Yorkers, service workers, whatever it is, so that like you would be covered under a 2-week quarantine period. They're also going to be providing free tests for folks who qualify for it and doing a bunch of other things to make sure that like everyone is in good shape. Do you think that's going to happen to Alabama? And in states in Alabama where like they don't even want to give you, like they get money from the federal government to provide food stamps and then they refuse to give it, or they drug test people. And what about like if you think about that, what do you think is happening in those prisons and jails where we've already seen upticks in violence and fatalities in a lot of these southern states? A lot of people are going to suffer from this because a lot of people all across the country are making minimum wage. And they're not making New York City minimum wage, which is $15 an hour. They're making $7.75, which is the federal minimum wage. They can't survive off of that. And they're not suspending eviction, so if somebody falls behind on rent on this time, they can still be evicted. They're not providing any additional resources. And, you know, those places, they tend to have even harder, they have a harder ability to get access to health facilities. So if you're in a rural area, and there's no doctor there, there's just no doctor there. So, like, I think that's the way it's going to show up in some of these southern states.
Thank you for that, Stanley. So Marco Prestige, I'm sorry. He wrote, exactly, most workers need to work overtime to survive. So a bill to cover workers' wages without considering their overtime pay still puts workers at a disadvantage. So that's another thing, the fact that they don't even get the overtime work. I mean, Tammy, so, we've been talking about this from a large national scale. Let's sort of like scale it down a little bit and talk about how the coronavirus is affecting the local elections. And if we're going to talk about politics, then of course we need to talk about how it's affecting the Democratic primary. So I want to throw it to you.
For those of you listening who may not know me or this is your first time, I am a local organizer, member of leftist orgs in the community / in the city. And right now, something that's super big is like petitioning to get people on the ballot for the congressional race that's coming up this year. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, all I'm seeing in my inbox are meetings canceled, petition drives canceled, link ups canceled. And, basically what I see happening is the very flaws in the system that are allowing coronavirus to permeate our society and that are going to end up infecting so many more people than need be are going to be protected because of coronavirus. It's like a horrible snake eating its own tail kind of thing, because right now a lot of like left-leaning or more progressive movements are effectively being squashed. Like the incumbent and the establishment is safe. Like they have their voter base. It is always more difficult to kind of campaign as somebody from the outside trying to come in. So I feel like the incumbents are fine. But all those people that need to even petition to get themselves on the ballot, people like Samelis Lopez in the Bronx, who is a staunch advocate for guarantee as well as Medicare for all, people like Jamal Bowman in New York 16th district, affecting literally, he's running for the district that literally has to deal with the New Rochelle crisis. Like all of those people who are running to make change, they're essentially going to be snubbed. Like who's coming up to you on the street to like use your grubby pen and sign a petition? Nobody. So, I'm just kind of stressed that this is going to dampen the vibe of 2021 and make it so that we won't see the changes that we need to even curb a pandemic like this.
So you should know that in New York State that they reduced the amount of petitions you need to get on the ballot by 30%, but they also moved up the deadline from April 12th to March 17th. So, yeah, it's always something. But that's the current situation right now for petitioning from last I heard. But, yeah, it's going to be rough. A lot of elections are going to go differently because of this process. It's really going to be interesting to see how folks choose or are able to campaign over the next couple of weeks.
I will say that, Bernie's campaign, even in Michigan where he lost, like Bernie organizers are now organizing donation drives and like food run via pickup apps in a really creative way. And while Bernie has called off all door-to-door canvassing nationwide for his like presidential campaign, he has switched to ramping up calls for text and phone banking.
Yeah, no,
that we
for
shall.
sure.
That we shall.
I just wanted, I do think that. So even like we're talking about the Democratic primary tonight, right? They were supposed to have their first face-off. Joe Biden faces off with Bernie Sanders in front of a live audience, and they're still going to do it, but they're not going to have the live audience. But I think that we still have to like pay attention and make sure that we're locked in. And as we mentioned, a lot of us, like our caucuses are coming up, our primaries are coming up, and I'm not sure how many of us are going to be willing to go to the polls. I mean, I'll put it like this. If millennials, if we feel like we can't be affected and we're still going to take these $50 round trip flights to Miami, then show up to the polls and vote, okay? Because that's what's going to get Bernie Sanders elected, number one.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just put it there. But I would say this because I did want to just move on quickly and get back to how the pandemic is affecting the economy. So Bernie Sanders, he put out an op-ed this morning talking about how the fact that we have globalization and disastrous trade policies, because of that, we've been outsourcing millions of jobs and factories overseas, having and factories. And as a result, it's affecting our economy. So that means we have to be dependent on China and other countries to get essential things like masks, like prescription drugs, like the gloves that everyone's getting, medical equipment for like ventilators, etc. So I wanted to put that out there because the pandemic, besides affecting our local communities, which we talked a lot about, let's talk about how it's affecting the national economy. Stanley, and I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, so this is a major blow to China, and China is en route to losing its role as the number one manufacturer for the world because of this. People are canceling contracts with China. They're not shipping. They're not exporting anything from China right now. China is really going to take a major blow to this. There are other countries that are suffering from this as well. Obviously, Italy is going through a full-blown pandemic right now, and things are really bad. Africa, the continent of Africa hasn't had it as bad as other countries or other parts of the other continents, which has been pretty interesting. And they have banned Europeans from traveling to African countries for at least the next month or so. So it's been really interesting. But yeah, like Bernie mentions, we are an economy that's tied to the global market. So as the global market suffers, so will we. So if China suffers and takes a hit, we will take a hit. And the fact of the matter is we were already en route to a recession because of Trump's policies. This has accelerated that
Tammy,
process.
I want to get your thoughts on everything that's being said, especially when it comes to, like Stanley said, we're linked to a global economy.
So I work at a finance real investment firm in Midtown, and it is just sheer panic. It's like mixture of sheer panic as well as like the millionaires and billionaires in my company being like, you should stay optimistic. Like, this is when people like us thrive. You just invest and wait for the bottom line to come up in 10 years. And let me just say, I've been waiting for something like this for a long time. Like, I'm a personal believer that capitalism has been eating itself for years and years and years. And it takes exactly something like this to prove how messy it is, but also how fragile and just totally incapable it is as an economic system for billions of people. Like, when the stock markets plunged like that, all I saw was that my family is going to be in utmost turmoil. And it's crazy how these little numbers on a small screen from data all around the world have such a huge impact. Like, I feel like as we see the virus spread more and more, like, Europe bump China. Like, I get it with the manufacturing, but do you know how much we import from Europe? How much we export to Europe? Do you know how much European and American trade is linked and how businesses move back and forth literally on a monthly basis? That alone is going to be enough to stifle us for a very long time coming. And as more and more countries like France, like Italy, go into complete lockdown, we're not going to see any money moves being made anytime soon. So all that says to me is that we're just going to see, folks struggle to pay bills. We're going to see folks struggle to get the goods that they're used to buying. And then we're going to see companies on the bounce back lay off tons of people to get their bottom line straight again. And totally change the economy as we see it today.
Tammy, you brought up such a great point and how this leads, and you can't help but to think about capitalism. It's so fragile, right? All it takes is a virus, and we've seen SARS, bird flu. We've seen things like this happen before. All it takes is a small microscopic virus to take down a whole economy. And, back to Bernie Sanders, if now's the time for a political revolution, if there was any time, now is the time. I also think about like Killer Mike, right? Because he's been talking about how us, especially as Black folks, we need to become self-sustaining. We can't depend on a system that wasn't created for us and exploits us, because now when that whole system implodes, what are we going to do? Right? So there's a lot to talk about here. I actually wanted to read a comment from Danny Winston. He said, in regards to Stanley talking about Africa, or I think it was Tammy who was talking about Africa, he said, I just came from Africa, and they are not playing. They checked my passport for where I've traveled and gave me an ear, fever, and swab test. So at least we know that they're taking things seriously. I mean, I just got off a plane last Sunday. Nothing. Here in New York City. They were just like, oh, you're free. Go ahead. It was nothing. But
Black people don't play with hygiene. I'm telling you.
For sure. So, like, we're talking about the worst possible effects. We're talking about the reality of this pandemic. Let's talk about the U.S. government response, right? Because that's where our tax dollars go. Protecting us. Has the U.S. government been sufficient in their response? Like, what are you guys feeling about that? And moving forward, do you feel like the U.S., leader of the free world, can handle an epidemic like this?
It's been very obvious that they failed completely.
No,
I'm sorry, Tammy. Were you going to go first? I'm sorry. Yeah, they failed miserably. We haven't had any tests. We don't have any tests available. This got way worse than it needed to be. If there was some proper management of this, then, we could have very easily just like not nipped it in the butt, but gotten control right away. And we didn't do that. Instead, Trump kept saying it was fake and no one's getting corona. They didn't put the proper funding towards anything. They weren't looking for symptoms. They weren't looking for ways to make sure people were treated. And then now it's kind of spiraled out. And instead of being stable, all Trump keeps doing is destabilizing the markets even more.
For me, Americans are so whack if we don't use this to like overthrow the government and revolution. Like, I hope we don't get flagged by the FBI for this, but like, Molotov cocktails, my friends, because I literally can't believe that we have a leader of like 300 million people saying that it's a hoax. Like, the fact that cities have to independently declare a state of emergency in order to force access to more funding and testing from the CDC is an absolute nightmare. Like a nightmare. In South Korea, you know what the death rate was in South Korea? The media is panicking and saying there's something like a 2 to 3% death rate compared to influenza 0.1. In South Korea, it was 0.7. They moved so efficiently in forcing their citizens to stay home and to also, sanitize the streets, make moves in quarantining individuals and items moving across their borders. Like, the U.S. government is a joke in my eyes right now, and it should be in everyone else's too.
Not only that, so I know we mentioned how one of the biggest failures was the fact that we didn't deploy tests so that people can determine who's infected. And that's how South Korea was able to, I don't want to say contain the pandemic, but at least get some control of it. So the U.S. has tested far fewer people per capita than any of its peer nations, and by a wide margin. On top of that, to take it back to Trump, he actually made government less able to respond to a pandemic since he's been in office. How? By shutting down a program developed in 2005 by the U.S. Agency for International Development to detect and research infectious diseases that arise in animal populations and eventually jump to humans, which is probably how the coronavirus even started. So the program was created by Bush because remember, it was in response to the H1N1 bird flu scare, and then Obama kept the program, but again, Trump, I think, very recently decided to get rid of it. And on top of that, he's been calling for repeated budget cuts to the CDC and the National Institutes of Health. And in 2018, he ordered the White House National Security Council's entire global health security arm to shut down. So again, this president has been taking every step and measure he could to make sure we're less safe, to be blunt.
Yeah. Listen, folks wanted Trump. They got Trump and everything that comes with him in a Republican leadership. Like, they do not care about people. They do not care about safety. They care about money and the special interest. And don't get me wrong, Democrats care about that too. Like, they have an incentive to have society run functionally. And this administration does not. It just does not. And this has always been my frustration with folks who are Republicans and folks who supported Trump, because this is exactly, Republicans have been pushing to do stuff like this for years. They've been trying to defund the Center for Disease Control. They've been trying to defund the Department of Health. This is what they've wanted to do for years. And people kept saying, oh, well, the government doesn't run properly. The government can run properly if you fund it and you hire competent people. The government is literally made up by regular people. And the Trump administration has done everything to strip them of all of these resources and all of the things that make it good. And now people are suffering. And what's even scary is that Trump might win his reelection.
He will. He will. He will, because people aren't voting for Sanders, and Biden is literally senile. So.
and I don't think a pandemic is enough to scare people, honestly.
Well, to me, that just speaks to how uneducated and ignorant Americans really are. I mean, if you're willing to let your racist mentality or whatever else it is that makes you have some type of affinity for Trump, if you're going to let that overshadow and blind you from real life issues like this pandemic, then I kind of think get what you asked for. Like, right? Like, what else can be done? How much more can we educate people? How much more can we try to inform them? If they're still like, no, I'm voting for Trump, then it is what it is. Your community is going to be affected too. I don't know what else to say or feel.
But the problem is, if it was just Trump voters who were going to suffer from this, I would sit back and relax. That's not the case. My father is directly impacted by this and could be in danger because of this. People that I love are impacted and in danger of this because folks did not turn out in 2016 and white folks did, and we got Trump. And then now folks are not turning out for Bernie, and we're going to get Biden to go against Trump. And the fact of the matter is, if you ever want to know what your vote does, it's the shit that you never had to think about. Damn, edit point. It's the things that you never had to think about that get taken care of when you have a solid, functioning government with good leadership. That's what it does. Because now you have weak leadership, and these are the things you have to think about, and these are the things you have to be worried about.
Stanley, with that being said, that leads us to our call to action. Because forgive me, because I get frustrated about stuff like this, and it's almost like you want to just throw up your arms and just say, well, just forget it then. But that's not what we're gonna do. What needs to be done to protect the most vulnerable communities from the coronavirus moving forward? What can we still do to make sure we're protecting these people and ourselves?
Stay in the house if you can. Wash your hands thoroughly. If you do need to go outside, make sure you're washing your hands thoroughly, making sure you're being sanitary. Like, all the things your parents used to tell you had to do when you were a kid, do them. That's one. Two, if you're buying supplies, don't buy up everything. Buy what you need. We're not running out of food and toilet paper. Just stock up like you would usually stock up, because other people are going to be stocking up too. And it's bad enough that some folks are going to have to go into their savings or even their rent money to cover these new expenses. It's even worse now when they can't get stuff because everything is sold out. So now what they can get is going to be at an inflated price. And then finally, make sure in this presidential election in November, vote Trump out of office. Vote Trump out of office and vote every single Republican out of office in Senate and in Congress. Republicans have proven time and again that they do not deserve to be in leadership and that they are not capable of being in leadership. So, fire them.
Tammy, what are your thoughts? What can be done so that we are protecting the most vulnerable communities at this time of crisis?
First things first, I guess, especially for New Yorkers, please find out while you're at home, while you're not doing anything on the computer, find out who your elected officials are and call them, complain. Like, you need to let them know to enact paid sick leave bills, to go hard at the state and federal level protections for workers so that we can mitigate the spread of the disease as much as possible. The most important thing is that those most at risk for complications of coronavirus are safe. So reach out to, those folks that who have chronic pre-existing conditions, your elderly folks. Ask them, if they want to get a seamless delivery, or if they're okay, or if they're feeling okay. Reach out and check on them. Call your locals and make sure to let them know to advocate for those in your community that need advocating for. The last thing for me, though, is wake up, America. Like, this is the number one thing for me. Wake up. Wake up. Like, if you think something like this can't be prevented, then you're an idiot. Vote for universal health care, because it is literally the only thing that can stop things like this. Doctors not having enough beds available, testing too costly and not available from the government, people uninsured and still going to work while they're coughing, sneezing with a fever, muscle aches. All of this could be prevented by having universal health care. So stop voting for the safe choice, get your head out of your butt, and vote for universal health care. Matter of fact, don't just vote for universal health care in the primaries, which is Sanders. Vote for local politicians who are talking about universal health care, because those are the people on the ground educating the community about what they need to protect themselves.
Well said. Thank you for that. I'll end this episode by saying this. Our country is facing a medical and economic crisis to the likes that we have not seen in generations. And to quote Bernie Sanders, it is at this moment we must remember that we are in this together. If our neighbor or coworker gets sick, we have the potential to get sick. If our neighbors lose their jobs, then that affects our local community. If doctors and nurses do not have the equipment or the staffing that they need, then people that we know and love may die. So now is the time for solidarity and robust action. This is what we talked about: political action, civic engagement, making sure you're going to the polls. There's been a local election here, even in my community, on Tuesday. Like, I have to vote. You have to understand the impact that going to the polls and having these leaders in place has on larger things, especially when it comes to pandemics. On top of that, another thing we need to increase the availability of corona test kits. That's like number one. We also need to build out more intensive care units. We need more ventilators, and we need to be protecting and supporting medical personnel by all means necessary at this time. But ultimately, what we must do is something that every other major country has done, and that has guaranteed health care to all people as a human right, not a privilege. It's now, during the coronavirus outbreak, that the lack of a healthcare system threatens all of us. Because what this shows us is that we are just as vulnerable as the person who has the least insurance. And I'll end with a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King. He says, "We are all caught up in an inescapable network of neutrality tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." I'm going to just let those words resonate in your spirit and in your soul, because the time is now to act. And remember, when you go to the polls and you're voting, you're doing it not just for yourself, not just for your parents and your children, you're doing it for all of us. Yes, and for anyone who is listening via podcast, please remember to share this on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can add us at Be Heard Talk. You can also support us by subscribing to us via patreon.com. That's patreon.com/BeHeardRadio. We need to update that. But we appreciate all the support. Our mission always is to inform, educate, and empower, but we can't do that without you guys' support. So thank you for that.